We have such a special guest for you guys today. I am so excited. We've got writer, producer Ron Leshem. He is the mastermind behind Euphoria, and he actually championed it here in the United States because it is an Israeli original show. And he also has a new show already out on Netflix called Bad Boy. Ron, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, so good to meet you finally. How are you?
I am excited, man. I haven't had anyone on the show yet who had a hit outside of the US and then brought it to the US and really championed it like you had to get it released here, like redone here, and then actually become an Emmy award winning show. I mean, it's absolutely impressive.
We usually we were doing these adaptations all over the world, like taking a format and creating a proof of concept, then traveling with it to Korea, Russia, India, anywhere, like all over Europe. But of course, Hollywood has always been the dream.
So I was reading that. I mean, you spent about 7 years trying to get Euphoria out here.
Yeah, for 7 years, everyone said no to Euphoria, and every single executive, every single network had the very detailed answer to the like why it will never have a chance. It will never be made, including HBO, until Casey Blois and Francesca Orsi took power. But yeah, but you know what? I mean, at the same time, our friends and Dan Cohen were pitching Stranger Things at the same time, and everyone said no to Stranger Things.
Really?
And everyone told them, listen, you have, 20 networks told them you should turn it into a show about an FBI guy coming to town. And when we were, a lot of times executives were telling us, if you make it more like Skins, the British dark comedy. And we said, yeah, but there's someone already did Skin. And if we try to create it more like Skins, we might get a development deal, but it will never be made. Like you want to, but yeah, Euphoria went and Stranger Things against all the algorithms and the mandates and everything. So if you do get it greenlit, at the end of the day, you have a bigger chance of standing out.
I think it's important for people to hear this, especially up and coming writers who are breaking in or trying to break in, because you had a successful show that was popular in Israel, won awards, right? So you already have like quote street cred. Hey, I made this happen. We can make this happen again. And you're still getting met with those cheesy notes of it's not going to happen, but you stuck to your guns, and I really respect that.
Yeah, but you know, so it took us 7 years. My producing partner, Das Lichtenstein, and I were just knocking on every door. But I wasn't feeling sorry for myself because every time I was meeting people, I met producers and writers who were waiting for 15 years with their scripts. Or I think Matthew Weiner was already an established writer when he wrote Mad Men in 1994. It was made in 2008, right? And even Aaron Sorkin had scripts waiting 15 years to get approved. It's not, and you know, for me, the obsession was because somehow my first writing jobs were on espionage and war stories or anti-war stories. So at that point, every time I was stepping, and I already moved to the US, my home was Boston already, and I was knocking on doors in LA, and every time people were typecasting me as the guy who should bring an espionage pitch or a war story. And I didn't want to do it. My dream as a kid was to create Train Spotting, Gus Van Sant, Elephant Kids, Heine, the French film. And I was never perceived as someone who can do this. And I lost confidence that maybe I'm the nerdy dude who would never be able to do a Train Spotting type of it. So I was obsessed with this. And I kept on knocking on every door, like fourth, fifth time. It was mostly about breaking the yeah.
Well, no, it makes total sense hearing your influences now, because that's what I was going to ask you is I was wondering, being our age and writing a story about adolescent youth and the challenges that they're going through, we're kind of removed from that. So, and plus when we grew up, things were a little bit different. So I was curious, like, what made you want to try and like really pierce the veil into the modern young person's mind and the modern challenges they have? But hearing you say like, well, these were my influences now makes total sense.
Yeah, and it was when you know, especially when you're dealing a lot with the question of AI and in the cinema and television, everything. When we know that around the corner, a few years from now, AI will be able to write a lot of the shows that we work on for 5 years in a single second or bit. The good thing about it that it will force us to only write what is extremely meaningful to us and what can make a difference, and recreate genres, reinvent something that no one had done before you. So hopefully AI will be late for that, right? And you have, and this is a question we were asking ourselves in the past all the time, like how do we find a voice that is unique and no one had done, is not the obvious? And how do we find a cross genre that no one had done before us? And what do we have to say? And in this show, I started. It started by I was writing the themes that I want to touch and explore about the teenage life and mental health, and I knew I wanted to do something that will be emotional realism, but not realism. And when we do it overseas, sometimes I start by doing a show in France or a show anywhere. We sometimes do global shows, like we have 10 filmmakers from 10 different countries on set, but we do it over there. And then moving to creating a show for HBO where you have the budget of one single episode sometimes equal 5 seasons, one episode, 5 seasons for what we do overseas. It changes the way your storytelling, right? Because, for example, with Euphoria, we knew that in order to grasp the short attention of this generation, you want to have 130 scenes per episode. Overseas, in many of the countries that we are creating, you can do 17 scenes per episode, 20 scenes per episode, not 130. So you have a proof of concept and you have a Bible, but then you're trying to create this and then knock on the doors of Hollywood to show them. Same as HBO will give you a chance to direct a pilot, even if you've never done a high volume app, because they've watched something you've done as a proof of concept. They've watched it on Sundance or something. So that was the reason we have freedom there. That when you work with the mess that we have on set, I just wrapped the show in Morocco, like filming in Morocco. You have such a mess in a beautiful way. It's not a formula. It's a mess. You get the freedom that you don't get here usually, typically.
The leap between like a 17 scene, almost kitchen drama, right, to 130 scenes could be so overwhelming of a change. But it sounds like you guys really embrace that. Did you have to take that mentality into Bad Boy on Netflix then?
Yeah, so the strange thing is that Bad Boy started as the first original pitch of Euphoria.
What?
Yeah. So I'll tell you. So I was a 20-year-old journalist. I locked myself in a juvie prison, and ever since I wanted to write the story of a juvie prison. And when I first pitched Euphoria, the original concept was actually the voice of a 17-year-old inmate, and the life outside, everything we see outside, and the characters are past timeline memories. And so Euphoria started with this, but then I knew I wanted to do this and do the train spotting Gus Van Sant Lahane, but through a juvenile prison. But executives told me that the audience was not ready to see kids in jail, and it's too early and too intense. So we took Euphoria to a different direction. And for 15 years, I was obsessed with the juvie show still. And then the funny thing is that there was one moment when I told this idea to one of the most powerful drama executives in Hollywood. And she said, yes, let's do Oz with kids. And I went back home and I felt, well, I don't want to do Oz with kids. I don't want to live in this world. So at that point, I knew that we will need to reinvent something completely different in the genre. And it turned into a story about a wounded soul of a future comedian. And it turned into a show about, it's a 13-year-old boy sent to prison. It was his own mother who called the police on him. And he finds himself sharing a cell with a boy his age who everyone warns him is this psycho killer, and the entire prison pressures him to kill this boy, but instead he falls in love with the boy, and they become soulmates. But it's also the sense of humor becomes his survival tool in prison, so he becomes a comedian in jail. And you meet him 20 years later when he's a successful comedian, and the past he has been hiding comes back to haunt him. So this is the reason why of the storytelling. And I felt like if I start, you know how it is when you're trying to pitch something in LA, a lot of the networks will give you some kind of a development deal just to have you on a shelf because they're afraid you'll be somewhere else, especially if you're like, okay, it's a genre you've been successful in. And I felt like I didn't want to be stuck in a development hell pipeline or be kind of engineered into the mandates or something. We said, well, let's do it with the freedom and complete freedom and kind of quickly even and just go wild and then bring it. So I was so happy when Netflix said, first of all, we love the original show. We want the original show to release it in 191 countries, and it launched in 46 countries or 47. It's on the top 10. But at the same time, Netflix said we want to create an adaptation for an American version. And I love this. And I love the moments when you bring an American soul showrunner to bring their interpretation. I honestly love this. And so, yeah, it's.
A couple things, because I guess my first question off the bat, because the episode I watched was from Israel. So is there an American version now being in development?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. The other thing is the character is so real to me that I thought it was based on a true story.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it
All
is.
right. Okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you're saying that. Yeah, so
no,
it's
man.
a boy. Strangely, when I was there as a journalist, and I came with a different, but when I locked myself in this juvie prison as a journalist, I met this boy.
Amazing.
And I didn't know years later that he's this guy who's a successful comedian, but he never talks about his past. And when I realized that this is the same guy, he just changed his name, but he doesn't have the guts to stand on stage and tell his own story. And he will never be a truly great comedian if he doesn't start telling about himself. That was the moment. Yeah, I think he started. Yeah, so in the show, it's the first time he is sharing his own.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, just going off of his opening monologue, he talks about having ADHD and how that can actually help with quick-witted comedy. But another thing with ADHD is that they can kind of pop off and get angry all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And so then it makes sense then when you see okay, so he's yelling at his mom, said something mean about his mom, probably didn't mean it, she took it the wrong way, and now his whole life changes. It's fascinating. So what kind of tips do you have for writers out there, or potential, I guess, producers who are looking to start breaking into this field?
Yeah, so when I first came to LA, I started writing down all the tips I was collecting. I remember going to J.J. Abrams' talk or meeting producers and asking them for their tips. And over the years, it is becoming even more complicated. Although Hollywood is now let's say in the TV field, it went from doing 250 shows per year to 600 shows per year. But it's tougher. It's tougher because it's kind of an era of organizational cowardness, and we live in one of the most conservative era in the history of Hollywood, not conservative in the political way, but in the artistic way. And I think even probably more than the 50s or the 80s that were kind of awful to Hollywood, and no one takes risks as they used to. And in many of those outlets, the number one value is avoid headaches. And a lot of them will not, they will say, we're not even reading the script. We want you first, or hearing the speech, we want you first to step into the room and answer the 3 questions, and they will try to engineer you into making sure that the trailer will be able to, the audience will know from the very beginning of almost the trailer what they're hoping will happen and why it matters to them so much, crucial, and what they know that they fear. They fear might happen, and why the stakes are so high, and everything has to, and there is the formula, and everything has to follow the formula. And when one of the outlets decides to invent a new mandate, and everyone is doing the same at the moment, and when they're trying to predict what will be a hit 2 years from now, they're just duplicating the things that worked now. And it's sad because basically the things that are standing out now are the things that went against all rules.
Absolutely.
But they're bringing all these MBA graduates to try and engineer everything into formulas and algorithms. And for that, you can just bring the AI and it will give you better answers, and it will be nicer to you. But it's just, I think it's a brutal time. But yet I still think, and I first of all, you know how it is. You have to develop 10 or 12 ideas simultaneously. When you're writing just one, but you're developing, you never know. It's not because your idea wasn't good enough, but you never know if there were pilots in the same world that failed and now no one wants to touch it or whatever. And you have to remember that when people which step into a room and people will tell you, executive will tell you, it's brilliant, it's awesome, it's the best script I've ever read. You'll probably will never hear from them again. But if they start like challenging you and saying, well, I mean, you have too many problems, then it might be a beginning of a dialogue. And I think above everything else, and this is something I've heard at the very beginning from Ram Bergman, the producer, you have to, when you step into LA Soul for the first time, you have to decide that this is your new way of life, not give it a chance for a year or two, because it might take 2 years, it might take 12 years, you don't know how. And of course, when you're choosing something, you have to make sure not to make the bad choices, the business initiative type of choices where you're thinking, oh, that story can work, this is a good story. It's not a good enough reason to step into it, because you're getting married with the story. You might need to live inside it for 5 years, to defend it, to bleed and tear over it. So you basically have to make sure that you're asking all the right questions and making sure that you know what in this story and in this voice and in this genre had never been done before. What is new about this voice? What is unique about this voice? And then there are all the tips that I was collecting that are kind of, and maybe they are individual, right? It's like, but about the technique, what makes you, because in a strange way, where our profession is the insane combination of, on the one hand, soul, and on the other end, formula and algorithm. And it's important. The analytical side of trying to understand how it works is and treating this with secrecy, because it's the roots of drama from the very beginning. You have to find the moments where you wake up at 5 a.m. and just work for 12 hours. But how do you look for inspiration the moments you are seeking inspiration? And for me, for example, when I needed to wake up for a new, I needed serendipity. I needed to get to a place I've never been to, like flying to China, to a city I've never been to. The scent and the oxygen and something about it is something I've never experienced. Just the scent on the street. And start walking for 10 hours, totally offline, just a note with the name of the hotel. So when I lose my way, I can get back to it. But because basically the problem in our day-to-day life is that we don't have, every thought of ours is cut after 30 seconds because a text message comes, something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But some of the thoughts need a 10 hours exploration, that you need to just go on this journey and check every turn. So I try to collect all these type of tips to myself and to writers that I work with.
I mean, you literally just hit on something that I kind of meditate on, when I find those, and it's that truth is found in the silence. And it is, going, like, for me, I'll go for that walk, or I'll just sit in my little chair and just be silent and just, let it come. And then you'll find that nugget, that inspiration, or that, that writer's block moment you're stuck on, or whatever. You'll find it. You just have to let it happen. And in that silence, not on Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ron, I'd like to thank you for this mini seminar you just put on for inspiration. Absolutely incredible. Bad Boy is out right now on Netflix. Congratulations on all of your successes.
Thanks.
Before I let you go, is there anything I didn't ask you that I should have?
I have tons of questions to ask you, but at a different time. Yeah, it's truly challenging times, but we're in the best profession ever, especially when our schizophrenia of people who, on the one hand, loves to be completely alone. Sometimes the solitude of writing for weeks on your laptop in a dark room in your bed or something, and then working with 300 people on set and being a leader to 300 people. This combination that comes only in the role of a showrunner and writer producer is like the only way of life that I found that makes me happy. So I try to support every other writer who loves
it's like you're an extroverted introvert.
Yeah, exactly.